Welcome to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel powered by InsideTexas.com. I'm Joe Cook, joined by Ian Boyd. Today, we got a little bit of breaking news to talk about. Inside Texas was able to obtain documents via open records requests that revealed a lot of details about Steve Sarkisian's contract that had not yet been revealed. The main one being his buyout. His previous contract was, I believe the buyout was 70% of the remaining sum. Now it is 85%. Some other details include, his total compensation, how he'll be compensated via direct payments and things like that. But Ian, the main takeaways and the main details that we had not yet learned about and that we wanted to know about were his buyout figures should, for some reason, Texas want to part ways with Steve Sarkisian, or if Steve Sarkisian, resigned or decided he wanted to take another job, be it college or NFL.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest scare for the administration is more so like, what if Sark got offered the Falcons job or something, right? Or to replace Pete Carroll in Seattle or something. And then obviously with the Texas fans, the A&M fiasco was so public and so present in the discourse that I think Texas fans are probably just a little bit concerned when they see Sark $10 million a year over whether or not Texas has put themselves in a position where, should he not be as good as it seems in the SEC, that they'd be busted like A&M was.
Yeah, we'll get to A&M, but we'll go over first the new information. Obviously, that 85% number is that new information, so we can run it down, and I think we will have a graphic on screen as well. Let's say things went decidedly south and through the crust of the earth after this year. He'd be owed $54 million, just about. 2025 season completed, $45 million. 2026, it'd be $36 million. 2027, it'd be $27.5 million. 2028 would be $18.5 million, and then 2029 it'd be $9.2 million. So obviously the number it's big. Those would be larger buyouts, I think, except for that $9 million than Texas had ever paid. But at the same time, I feel like because it's just a 6-year extension, not this 10-year rolling lifetime contract like you see with people like Gundy, and to make a basketball comparison, like with John Calipari, this seems like a very fair deal. Obviously, the 10 million mark, the 85% mark, up from 70%. We had talked about it Inside Texas, how people on both sides wanted this to come to fruition. And when Steve Sarkisian put pen to paper, or pen to DocuSign on the night of January 12th, that was all accomplished for everybody involved.
Can you repeat for me the number if they had to fire him after the 2024 season? What's the buyout?
It would be $54,315,000.
Okay, and then it goes to 40 the following year. Is that right?
45,475,000.
So the interesting thing there is, if Texas could bomb in year one in the SEC, and they're not going to fire him, right? Because I don't, even if they went 3-9 or something crazy, which probably only happens if Quinn Ewers is,
if Trey Owens is playing significant amount of games.
Yeah, Trey Owens is playing, something like that happens. They're not going to want to fire him. Even if the buyout were reasonable, you probably don't want to fire your Big 12 championship playoff contending coach after one bad year in the SEC. You're going to be like, well, what went wrong? Can we just shore this up in a year? Whatever. And then it drops pretty quickly after that. So, it's just not the worst case scenario where they have to pay this big sum. They have to buy him out to move off the contract. It's just that's not going to happen anyway. The years in which they would wait before they would make a drastic move to fire the coach sees the buyout go pretty far down. It's still more than the Gus Malzahn buyout, which was famous a few years ago. But thanks to the Aggies, it's anywhere near with Jimbo, it was what, $75 million for him,
right?
Plus another 10 or 15 for his assistants or something crazy. There's not going to be anything like that. And then on the other side, what are the numbers like if he should leave Texas for a different gig?
Well, before we get to that, I think
Okay.
it's worth pointing out that what you're talking about is worst case scenario, and we have seen extensions with, heck, Neil Brown just signed one the other day. Jim Harbaugh signed one after the 2020 season where you get these extensions and it's basically like, okay, we're making this work. We're giving you an extension so you can go recruit and still hang on to your job, but it doesn't make things difficult because it doesn't make things difficult to part ways just because we're not sold on you. And that was Michigan not sold on Jim Harbaugh after not being able to get over that Ohio State hump and then the 2020 season going downhill. This is not one of those extensions. This is
No.
we believe, yeah. And I think, we talked about worst case, but nobody here is expecting worst case because of what we've seen recruiting, on field deployment, all that stuff. This is a we believe in you extension. We are going to make you one of the higher paid coaches in the sport extension. It didn't come attached with a decade long term, at least from this season, just another 6 years. But this was something I think the details that we have over at InsideTexas.com shows just how much everybody wanted to get this done. It doesn't sound like from recent reporting, whether from ESPN or from Sarkisian himself, like the Saban factor really was much of one at all. This was something that both parties wanted. And Steve Sarkisian, as someone who enjoys the college game and enjoys being a college head coach, and Texas have their guy locked up for a while. And I think that's revealed in just a lot of the I wouldn't say it's one-sided either way, but terms that are probably amenable to both sides, whether it be Chris Elconte, Steve Sarkisian, and of course, Jimmy Sexton.
Yeah, I do think that Texas is a little bit protected in this contract because they're not going to want to move off of him for a couple of years anyway. But on his side, he's getting mega bucks, right?
Yeah.
$10 million a year. And then if he goes to the SEC and he goes like 10-2 next year and he goes to the playoffs again, which I think is pretty realistic expectation, he might just get another extension, right? In which he could be much closer to Jimbo if he goes to the SEC contract wise. If he goes to the SEC and keeps up the winning. So it's a win for both sides. If it continues to be a win on the field, then it probably just gets renegotiated anyway.
Right. And, economies change. I mean, Mac Brown was, I think, the highest paid or second highest paid in 2009 with $5 million. And then also, as we've noted, Texas didn't
Liberty
really
money now.
Yeah, Texas didn't really deviate from that. Charlie Strong was in that $5 million range. Tom Herman was as well. Steve Sarkisian, I mean, admittedly, arrived at Texas on a bit of a discount, and now he's up into a range that shows that Texas believes he is a top-notch coach at a top-notch program. And, I think the other side, the NFL, like you mentioned, the Falcons, if they gave him a call, or, whoever, the Saints, whatever of the NFL franchises who saw what Steve Sarkisian was doing and wanted that on their sidelines, the current contract is pretty industry standard. It's not the same buyout for if the Saints wanted to hire Sarkisian. This year, like if he left in the middle of the year for some reason, not plausible with the way the windows work, he would owe $10 million. That drops to $6 million in 2025, $4 million in 2026, $3 million in 27, $2 million in both 28 and 29, and then just $1 million in 2030. And like you'd mentioned, things will probably have either been reworked by then so that this contract doesn't really apply in 2030, or who knows what happens. But there's a clause, or I don't know proper legalese, but there's a section, a paragraph, there's a smattering of words in this extension that says, the parties agree that the head coach has special, exceptional, and unique knowledge, skill, and ability as a football coach, which, in addition to the continuing acquisition of coaching experience at the university, as well as the university's special need for continuity in its program, render head coach's services unique. There's a few more sentences of praise, and says, head coach also recognizes that the university is making a highly valuable investment in his continued employment by entering into this agreement and its investment, which would be lost or diminished were he to resign or otherwise terminate his employment as head football coach with the university prior to the expiration of this agreement. So Texas is basically putting it in writing, like, hey, we're paying you well because you're good. Please, make things work for us, and we'll make things work for you. But that NFL part, um, another school, for whatever reason, whatever reality that may be, is not going to have a very high monetary bridge, or a very long monetary bridge to cross. But I mean, they're probably never going to get to that bridge anyway with how Texas operates.
Yeah, it's very. It seems like it's. Correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding, but it's pretty much impossible that another school would poach Sark from Texas, right? He's for one, he's making 10 million, so he's in the top of any school. He's got all the Texas advantages. Obviously, the community is all in on winning around him, and I don't know what the buyout is if another school came calling, but it's just not
It would be that range.
okay. It's the same as the NFL,
Correct.
but the NFL is the one that's interesting because in a couple of years, it's like expensive for an NFL team to poach him in a year or two. But after a couple of years, it gets really cheap for the NFL to poach him if they wanted to under this contract. But it just goes to show, like, it seems like at the very least, Sark wants to coach Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning in the SEC. And then if he's like has big success, it seems like maybe he wants to keep the door open to consider the NFL. But I don't think he'd go to another college job. And I don't know if he would. He may find that's a pretty nice setup, and he wants to just keep doing that rather than going to the NFL either.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at the idea of, I don't even know if Lincoln Riley to USC applies for this one. I think the one that's most applicable, a feared outcome like the one you're talking about, would be Brian Kelly to LSU. But I don't think that's like a potential anymore because it's Texas football, and it's Texas in the SEC. Like,
Yeah.
they're not, that it doesn't get much better than that. And you can tell by the paycheck and by the ability of the program that we saw this past year. And to that point, in that ESPN article the other day about the end of the Saban era and Greg Byrne, Alabama athletic director's search for a new head coach that landed on Kalen DeBoer, Chris Lowe basically reported they didn't even bother. Like, they knew Sark wasn't going to leave. And that's not only because they probably had familiarity with Sark, but they have eyes like the rest of us. They saw what just happened on the field, what Sark says, how he says it, and his commitment towards building a college football program in his own image, not Nick Saban's image, at the University of Texas. So obviously this is great news for all sides to have this coach, to have Steve Sarkisian locked up, and also for all terms to probably be amenable to everybody. That wasn't the case for a rival, though. And that I think that there was, when the contract extension was initially announced on that Saturday, January 13th, there was some side eye from Aggies and others throughout college football saying, didn't you just watch, Jimbo Fisher get paid $76 million to go away? Like, what are you doing? And that was before it was known that Sark's contract wasn't fully guaranteed. It went from 70% guaranteed to 80%, 85% guaranteed. It was before some of the big numbers were announced. That wasn't found out until I think middle of February. So it's very obvious to me that Chris Del Conte looked east, saw what the Aggie leadership did, including Mr. Failing Upwards himself, Ross Bjork, in offering that contract extension, and decided we can still pay our guy. We can still make him a highly paid commodity within college football without doing something that hampers the school, which is Chris Del Conte's and obviously Jay Hartzell's, their main responsibility. They can do something right for all sides without being held captive by either an exorbitant buyout or the coach himself.
Yeah. Plus, like, another thing to consider is that that SEC TV money is going to start flowing in pretty soon. A&M, that obviously is the case for them too, but when they felt like they had to make a move, they had to pay like an enormous chunk of that salary like up front, right? And
Mhm.
even A&M, they were obviously gutted in some ways by the Fisher deal, but they are still paying Elko like what, 8 million a year or something, 7 million, 8 million a year, and they were able to pay like some of his assistants top money. So it's not like A&M is like just bankrupt now. They're still okay. Um, I if I can also, like Notre Dame and Oklahoma, who had their coaches poached in this new era of college football, are not really the same as Texas in that, like, I think Notre Dame and Oklahoma are very committed to football, and they punch above their weight a little bit in regards to like resources. And Brian Kelly was like, if I go to LSU, I will finally have like the NFL skill athletes that I haven't had at Notre Dame. And Riley, it's like, if I go to USC, I can have all the best players much easier than I can at Oklahoma. Maybe I can ditch some of this roster that I've recruited and developed that isn't really panning out like I thought, right? So I just Texas is just not like that. Like there's not really there's nowhere with a higher ceiling than Texas. If you know the administration is behind you, then it's like what are you going to do? Where else would you really want to be? That's going to be a upgrade. And definitely this contract I think reflects that now.
The other thing is, I think we've seen with Texas is that they don't rush into moves. They do not do things without a lot of thought and maybe not thought, but they don't do things without process.
They don't
It
now, right? Under
Yeah,
Del Conte and the new guys, they don't. With Herman, when they hired him, that was kind of a they
that
rushed
was
into that.
that was rushed, but Del Conte has shown that, and I know this is all about football, but you have to look at some of his other previous hiring and firing patterns. Women's basketball, he let a contract expire before he went big fish hunting and got Vic. Same thing happened with softball. Some situations his hand was forced, like with the varsity blues thing with tennis, and a track coach, I think, getting into some illicit personal problems. I don't know the full details, but things were obvious when he made moves. In some cases, that's been firings, and in some cases, that's been suggesting that head men's basketball coaches look for another opportunity. But now I think we also see that he makes the move when it's obvious when it comes to extensions. They don't go out ahead of their skis and extend a coach after a COVID season. I think there was some comparison about, well, A&M did it after 1 year, and now Texas is doing it after 1 year. I think now we can look at hindsight and say, aside from Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Devontae Smith just being otherworldly, there is so much about that 2020 season that you really just cannot apply going forward. A&M made the mistake of paying somebody over $100 million, I think, all told, based off that 2020 season. Texas is going off of incremental improvement from a 5-7 to an 8-5 to 12-2 with a playoff appearance as they're heading into the SEC. And they're going, like you said, with the TV money, they're going to have the money to do it. And especially as already the most lucrative college athletic program in the country. So anything else from the Aggies decision that you want to look at as it applies to Texas?
No, I mean I just think the Aggies made that mistake. Probably no one else is going to make it. No one else is going to like. I honestly don't even know how the Aggies did that. Like they weren't that out leveraged, right?
They didn't need
So
to do it. I mean,
they,
Jimbo Fisher was, remember the Christmas tree that got thrown out? Like he was not welcome in Tallahassee past the 2016 season, 2017 season. Like it was already gone, and they decided that they needed to overpay, and they needed to overpay twice. And I don't think Texas has done that, not only with Steve Sarkisian's first contract, but also this new extension where details were announced today. Head to Inside Texas. You can read all the different details, whether it be, just all the stuff previously reported, his salary, some of the perks, everything. We got that here on Thursday morning on Inside Texas. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, helps us bring instant reaction content like this on a consistent basis. Ian, thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you next time on the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel powered by InsideTexas.com.